Hello, I'm Ed Tranham, editor of the Assignment Report, a market intelligence report for the UK and international education industry. In this brief talk today, I want to first look at the global edtech investment themes over the last 18 months. Second, I'd like to look at the key drivers of this investment. And finally, provide some initial thoughts on the emerging impact of the lockdown on edtech. While technology has historically only accounted for 3% of total global education and training spend, the fast-growing and innovative nature of this sector is encouraging the launch of growing numbers of edtech startups. According to Crunchbase, almost 2,000 new education and training companies with a focus on edtech have been launched globally since 2010. North America has historically been home to the most startups, but the Asia-Pacific region has recently overtaken and contributed around 42% of the new startups in 2019. Now here's a flavour of the types of fundraising by edtech companies in 2019, using our own dataset covering 127 global edtech companies and around $3.2 billion of investment. Looking at the US, 49 companies raised almost $1 billion in 2019, which is almost a third of the total global fundraise. Guild Education, which is a Colorado-based provider of workforce learning and skills training opportunities, raised $157 million in November 19 at a valuation of $1 billion. Coursera, the California-based MOOC for higher education, with around 40 million learners from 150 universities, raised $103 million in 2019 and so far this year has raised a further $130 million from investors at a valuation of $2.5 billion. Examity, which is a New England-based developer of online proctoring and learning validation solutions, raised $90 million in 2019 and Degreed, a San Francisco-based learning experience platform for all forms of professional and lifelong learning and skills, raised $75 million last year. In China, 4 companies alone raised more than $100 million each in 2019. Dada, which is a Shanghai-based one-to-one English language teaching platform aimed at 4 to 16-year-old English language learners, raised $255 million. The company has now raised nearly $900 million since launch in 2014. Notebox, a Beijing-based homework support app provider for the K-12 market in China, raised $150 million in 2019 from Chinese technology company Alibaba. Now in the current year, Zuobang, which helps K-12 students in China find solutions for homework problems via a mobile app, raised $750 million alone in June. And this month there are reports that One Fudayo, the Beijing-based online tutoring platform, which raised $1 billion only in April this year, plans to raise another $1.2 billion at a valuation of $13 billion, making it the most valuable education company on the planet. In India, another market where investment in edtech has taken off from a low base, Byju's, a learning app for grades 4 to 12, which creates personalised learning programs for individual students based on their proficiency levels and capabilities, raised $150 million last year, led by the Qatari Investment Authority. And so far this year, the company has raised a further $322 million, most recently at a valuation of around $10.5 billion, making it the second most valuable education company on the planet. Other notable fundraisers in India during 2019 included Unacademy, which provides students with access to online lessons and resources for test prep. They raised $50 million last year, and Vedantu, which is an online learning platform providing real-time interactive lessons, raised $42 million last year, and they've added an extra $45 million in the current year. Now, by comparison, in the UK, 29 companies raised £170 million in total in 2019, which is an average value of just under £6 million per fundraise. Now, although the number of transactions was similar to the prior year of 24, the value increased by £81 million, an above average year for edtech funding in the UK. The increase was driven by two large fundraisers. First, FutureLearn, the London-based social learning platform established by the Open University, which raised £50 million from the Australian Seek Group, and Graduate, a London-based provider of engagement and career service management software, which raised $60 million from K1 Investment Management. Now, other notable fundraising by UK companies in 2019 included Sparks, which is the Exeter-based in-class homework solution for maths using machine learning, personalised content and data analytics, which raised £20 million, and Immersive Labs, which is an e-learning platform that uses cyber war games to train IT and security teams, raised $40 million in 2019. So what are the major investment themes in global edtech? Well, first, there is a noticeable geographical divide in the sector focus of early stage companies and the investment they attract, with developed markets investment dollars largely going to post-secondary edtech companies, that is higher education, corporate learning, career readiness, and emerging markets investment going to K-12 companies. From our data set, 93% of investment in emerging markets, that is around $1.3 billion, went to K-12 companies principally focused on online tutoring, test prep, homework support and English language teaching. This compares with only 18% in developed markets. On the other hand, 82% of investment in developed markets, that is around $1.4 billion, went to companies in higher education, corporate learning and career readiness. Second, the US and Chinese companies continue to dominate fundraising in 2019, reflected both in the overall numbers and the total top rounds for the year. This divide and dominance of Chinese, US and increasingly Indian edtech companies in fundraising is driven by two principal factors. First, demographics. In China, India and other emerging markets, the growth of the middle class, increasing disposable income and rising competition for places in top local and international universities is increasing the demand for supplemental K-12 education as the awareness of the importance of education grows. By comparison, in many developed markets, the proportion of disposable income spent on K-12 education is significantly lower, as is the absolute number of students. That said, one consequence of the COVID-19 enforced lockdown on education in general and K-12 in particular has been growth in the use of digital platforms and resources, both by schools and by parents, and online tutoring, mainly by parents. While other companies have continued to charge, many, especially content providers, have made their resources and platforms free of charge for the duration of the lockdown, hoping that users will convert to paid ones once the crisis is over. My Tutor, one of several early stage UK online tutoring platforms, recently raised £4 million from investors during the lockdown, taking the total amount raised since inception in 2013 to £14 million. The second driver is scalability. To succeed, edtech companies need to be able to scale from a few users to thousands. The size of emerging markets enables early stage companies to scale quickly. Only the US offers similar scalability options in K-12. The UK, by comparison, is a small market for K-12, driven by national curricula and assessment frameworks, which often limit the ambitions of edtech companies. For a UK K-12 edtech company to be truly global, they need a non-national curriculum dependent offer, for example maths, and or underpinned by some smart technology, for example adaptive learning or some form of machine learning. As a result, very few UK-based edtech companies have made it big in global K-12, of which the standout company is Promethean, the interactive whiteboard company now owned by Hong Kong-based NetDragon Websoft. On the other hand, the need to acquire 21st century skills, the global use of English and the global reputation of higher education provides opportunities for edtech companies in developed markets, especially in the US, but also in Europe, to scale their businesses globally. Examples here include MOOCs, such as the ones already mentioned, Coursera in the US, FutureLearn in the UK. Language apps, for example, US-based Duolingo, whose platform uses gamification to help its 30 million active monthly users learn to read, listen and speak in around 30 languages. And Busuu, which is the London-based online language platform that combines language learning courses with AI-powered features. And e-learning businesses, for example, 360 Learning, which is a French company providing learning and development professionals with the tools to deliver a decentralized model of course creation and knowledge sharing. Turning now to the likely medium to long-term impact of the pandemic on edtech, there is little doubt that the lockdown has acted as an accelerant to the adoption of solutions like Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom and Zoom to support online learning for both schools and higher education. These global platforms are likely to put even greater pressure on more education-focused learning management systems such as Blackboard, Canvas and here in the UK on Show My Homework, Firefly and others to add value to their offer. The rush to home learning has also exposed the lack of interoperability of edtech within the school and higher education systems. It is quite likely that this migration to online learning across the sector in response to the pandemic will finally shift the traditional paradigm of teaching and learning towards a greater use of e-learning and education technology in the future, although each market segment will be impacted to different degrees. For many edtech companies, a key metric will be the conversion of free customers to paid ones once the crisis is over. Ultimately, this will be determined by the value and impact of online learning to students and institutions. Interestingly, one company which has focused its efforts on learning impact rather than acquiring new school customers is Dreambox Learning, the US K-8 adaptive learning maths company, which has spent the lockdown supporting teachers at subscribing schools to use its platform more effectively to support home learning. We've also seen a number of strategic acquisitions across the industry since the start of the pandemic as private equity and trade buyers scramble to acquire digital assets to fill gaps in their product portfolio, and vendors take advantage of the multiples acquirers are willing to pay. One recent example is IXL Learning's, the US-based K-12 personalised learning platform's, proposed acquisition of 3P Learning, the Australian company behind Mathletics, for $189 Australian in cash, which implies a multiple of 11.4 times EBITDA. Now, one final thought. Despite the billions being invested in edtech, there is no guarantee that raising lots of money from investors at sky-high valuations will deliver a successful outcome for founders and learners. Many companies fail to scale. Many companies focus too much on the technology and not on the problem they are trying to solve. Many companies only offer one part of the solution. The industry is awash with companies that have shone brightly only to fade very quickly. Newton, the New York-based provider of adaptive learning technology and courseware, which launched in 2008 and raised $182 million from a wide range of investors in 9 funding rounds, was sold for less than a tenth of that sum in May 2019 to the US publisher Wiley. And probably the most expensive edtech failure to date is Amplify, an edtech business providing a K-12 digital curriculum and online assessment, which was established by Rupert Murdoch in 2010 to transform education, and which was sold to its management for a nominal sum 5 years later after News Corp had invested $1 billion in the venture. Thank you for listening.